Hi.
I had always known something was off, but I chose to ignore it. Denial, I suppose, is a potent thing. And for a long time, it kept me in the dark. But that evening, that night, was when everything came crashing down. The moment I couldn't pretend anymore. The air in the room had an electric charge, like the kind you feel just before a thunderstorm. The truth, like rain, was about to pour down hard. Ethan, my brother-in-law. I'd always trusted him, like a second son. He was close to me. Hell, he was practically family. I'd known him since he was a teenager, before he even met my sister. Back then, he was the quiet, studious kid who never caused any trouble, always a little too serious, always following the rules. We'd shared beers, swapped stories about our lives, about women, about the pressure of being men in a world that constantly tried to take everything from us. In a way, I thought of him as a sort of son. Maybe that was the problem. My wife, Lydia, had been distant for months, but I didn't understand why. At first, I thought it was work. She had started a new job at a high-pressure law firm, her hours growing longer, her face more tired every day. She didn't want to talk about it, so I didn't press her. I gave her space. But something about her behavior felt off. She started leaving her phone face down. She'd jump at the sound of a text notification, her smile stiff and forced when I came into the room. And then there were the late nights. Not just late, but the long ones. Nights where she'd leave the house to work on a case or meet a friend she claimed she hadn't seen in ages. My heart told me she was lying, but I didn't want to admit it. It wasn't until I found the message that I knew the truth. One night, after Lydia had gone out, again, I couldn't sleep. My gut was telling me to do something. So, I went through her phone. At first, I couldn't bring myself to look too deeply. But something about the way she had handed me her phone earlier that day, so nonchalant, like there was nothing to hide, made my pulse quicken. I opened the messages just to glance. At first, it seemed like innocent chatter. But then I saw his name. Ethan. It was a string of messages, dated from the past month, full of flirtation, longing, and coded references I didn't understand at first. Then came the photos, pictures of Lydia at places I didn't recognize, places she never mentioned to me, and some of Ethan, too, looking far too close for comfort. They were affectionate, touching. He'd even sent a photo of his bare chest, the muscles in his arms flexing like he was trying to make a statement. My stomach churned. I kept scrolling, not daring to breathe too loudly. The messages turned more personal, more intimate. One text in particular stopped me cold. It was from Lydia, saying, "Last night was incredible. I miss you already. Can't wait for next time." The ground shifted beneath my feet. My own wife. With Ethan. My brother-in-law. I felt like an idiot. The fool. How long had this been going on? For how long had they been lying to me? The betrayal was suffocating, thick in the air. I couldn't process it all at once. I had to confront him. I had to know the full extent of this. If not for closure, then for my own damn sanity. I drove to Ethan's apartment, my heart pounding with each mile. I thought about calling Lydia, asking her what the hell was going on, but I knew it would be pointless. She would lie. She always lied. No, this needed to be between me and Ethan. He was the one who had crossed a line I couldn't ever uncross. When I arrived, I found Ethan sitting on his couch, scrolling through his phone, a cold beer in his hand. He didn't even look up as I entered, which pissed me off even more. Like I was some stranger walking into his life. I slammed the door behind me, making him flinch. "Jesus," he muttered, standing up. "What's your problem?" I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. The rage, the hurt, it was all boiling over, and I was so damn tired of pretending I didn't feel it. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" I finally said, my voice low, dangerously steady. "Did you think I wouldn't see it?" I pulled my phone from my pocket and shoved it into his chest. The messages, the photos, everything. He stared at it for a long moment, his face draining of color. Ethan had always been the kind of guy who prided himself on his cool, collected demeanor, but now I saw the cracks. The sweat forming on his brow, the twitch in his eye, the shaky breath he took as he lowered the phone. "You," His voice was shaky, but he cleared his throat, trying to sound confident. You don't understand, okay? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never meant for you to find out. You think I care about your damn excuses? I snapped. You were my brother. I trusted you. You were family. And you did this to me. To us. To Lydia. The words were coming out faster now, each one sharper than the last. His eyes flicked around the room, desperate for a way out. He took a step back, running a hand through his hair. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said, though his voice was softer now, like he was trying to talk me down, to make it sound like he was the victim. It just happened. We were drunk and things went too far, and it didn't stop. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to stop it. You're pathetic, I spat, my chest tightening with a mix of anger and betrayal. You had a choice. Every step of the way, you had a damn choice, and you chose her. You chose to hurt me. Ethan shook his head, trying to defend himself. It wasn't like that. You don't understand. We were both. No, you listen to me. I cut him off. Lydia has always been the one. You knew that, you knew it from the start. And you knew what this would do to me. You knew, Ethan. This isn't some mistake or lapse in judgment. This was a decision. A choice you made. The tears in his eyes betrayed him. I didn't want it to go this far. I swear, I didn't. I thought I could end it, but you didn't, did you? I took a step closer to him, the words coming out like venom. You let it keep going. Because it was easier. Because you couldn't resist her. And now you have to live with it. This is the price of your actions. Ethan's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. I ruined everything I know. But I didn't mean for it to hurt you. Save it, I said, shaking my head. You've already hurt me more than I ever thought possible. And now, you have to live with the consequences of your actions. Not me, not Lydia. I stood there for a moment, my breath heavy in the quiet room. I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't stand the sight of him, the man who had been like a son to me, the man who had destroyed everything. I turned and walked out, leaving Ethan behind in his mess of broken words and regret. The days after my confrontation with Ethan felt like a blur, a haze of anger, regret, and disbelief. I should have known better. I should have seen the signs sooner, but it didn't matter now. My life had been upended, and the storm that was unleashed in that apartment wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the fallout, the consequences that would ripple through everything. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. No, that was just the beginning. What came next was worse, infinitely worse. The destruction of Ethan and Lydia's reputations, their careers, their entire lives. It spread like wildfire, unstoppable once it took root. And it was my doing. I didn't set out to burn everything down, but in some twisted way, I became the match that started the blaze. It all started with a single phone call. The day after I confronted Ethan, I couldn't bring myself to speak to Lydia. I didn't want to look her in the eyes, not yet. I didn't even know what to say. She had been lying to me for months, hiding this affair with Ethan, and now the walls had come down. But she wasn't the only one at fault. Ethan had played his part too. And it wasn't just the affair. No, he had used his position, his access to information, to manipulate the system in ways I hadn't known about. The affair was just the surface. The financial misconduct beneath it was the real poison. I had done a little digging. After seeing the messages between him and Lydia, I couldn't stop myself from searching further. Ethan had been using his family connections, my connections, to funnel money, to manipulate contracts, and to engage in insider trading. But it wasn't just that, he'd also used his charm, his boy-next-door image, to manipulate people into trusting him with large sums of money. I couldn't believe it at first. He'd been involved in at least 3 separate scams that, if revealed, would ruin him and anyone who had trusted him. And, as it turned out, Lydia had been complicit in some of it. I didn't tell Lydia what I had uncovered. I didn't need to. The truth had a way of making itself known, especially in the digital age. The company Ethan worked for, a high-profile tech firm, had always prided itself on its clean image. Ethan had built a reputation as a rising star, an ethical entrepreneur. His role as a VP of operations had earned him countless awards, accolades, and connections. He'd charmed the board of directors, investors, and clients alike with his smooth talk and seemingly spotless track record. But I knew now it was all smoke and mirrors. Behind his polished exterior was a man who had been playing a dangerous game with people's lives. When I found the evidence, I knew it had to come out. I had to expose it, they had to be exposed. But I didn't just want to ruin Ethan's life. No, I needed to send a message that what they'd done, what they'd taken, couldn't just be swept under the rug. The affair was bad enough, but this was a betrayal of a much larger scale. The financial side of it would shake the entire city, maybe even beyond. So, I made the decision. I went straight to the authorities with the proof of the financial misconduct. I handed over everything, emails, bank transfers, insider trading reports, everything I had gathered. And once that train started moving, there was no stopping it. Within days, the scandal broke wide open. The story hit the front page of every major news outlet, and the details were shocking. The company Ethan worked for issued a public statement, distancing themselves from him, calling his actions egregious and unethical. Investors pulled out. Contracts were canceled. Partners severed ties. Ethan's once promising career was obliterated in a matter of hours. And then came the personal fallout. It wasn't just about the financial misconduct anymore. As the affair with Lydia became known, the public's perception of both Ethan and Lydia began to shift. People they had once trusted turned against them. Ethan's family, the ones who had always supported him, were blindsided by the news. His parents were devastated. They'd always seen their son as a good, honest man, and now he was a disgrace. But it wasn't just his reputation that crumbled. Olivia, my wife's best friend and Ethan's accomplice, had been just as involved in the scheme. She'd been Ethan's financial partner in some of the most egregious activities, using her connections in law and finance to cover up his tracks. She had always been that friend who was a little too friendly with Ethan, but no one had ever questioned her loyalty to him or to Lydia. But when her involvement in the financial schemes was exposed, her reputation, everything she had worked for, was destroyed. The impact on Lydia was nothing short of catastrophic. She had always prided herself on her professional accomplishments. She had worked hard, fought for everything she had achieved. But as soon as her affair with Ethan became public, her career, too, was on the line. Her colleagues, some of whom had been aware of the affair, started distancing themselves from her. Clients started pulling out of her cases. Her reputation in the legal community, one that had taken years to build, collapsed as quickly as a house of cards. At first, I had mixed feelings. I couldn't deny the satisfaction of watching them both fall from grace. But as I watched the destruction unfold, I started to feel the weight of it all. This wasn't just about Ethan and Lydia anymore. It wasn't just about what they'd done to me. This was about everything they had taken from everyone who had trusted them. The public was unforgiving. They didn't see the complexities, the reasons behind their actions. They saw only the end result, the scandal, the betrayal. I couldn't ignore the fact that in exposing them, I had caused this. I'd put their lives on display, torn them apart piece by piece. Ethan and Olivia lost their jobs, their friends, their dignity. Lydia, too, was now a public figure for all the wrong reasons. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for them. There was a part of me, maybe the part that had been hurt so deeply, that couldn't find any empathy for the people they'd become. I couldn't forget what they had done to me, to my family. Maybe they didn't deserve the utter destruction they were facing, but it was hard to feel bad when I thought about the months of lies they had told, the lives they had manipulated for their own gain. They were paying the price now. Ethan, once the golden boy, was now an infamous criminal, a man whose name was synonymous with dishonesty and corruption. Olivia, the trusted confidant, was now just another cautionary tale. And Lydia, my wife, was left to pick up the pieces of a life that had been shattered, both by her own choices and by mine. In the end, we were all victims of the same lie, that we could control our actions without facing the consequences. But the truth always catches up, sooner or later. The destruction of Ethan and Olivia's careers was just the beginning. The fallout from their betrayal reached even further, spilling over into the friendships and relationships they had so carefully cultivated. One of the first people to turn against Olivia was Harper, her closest friend, the woman who had been by her side through every high and low of her life. And when Harper finally found out the full extent of what had happened, she didn't hold back. The disappointment in her eyes was enough to make even the most hardened man feel ashamed. Harper had always been the strong, grounded one in their friendship. She was the voice of reason, the one who kept Olivia from straying too far off course, or at least, that's what I had always thought. From the outside, their bond had looked unbreakable, like two women who could face anything together. But when the truth came out, it didn't take long for Harper to realize just how much Olivia had betrayed her. It wasn't just the affair with Ethan that had broken things, it was everything that came after. The lies, the manipulation, and the self-serving decisions that had ruined not just Olivia's life but so many others. It started with a text. Harper had sent Olivia a message early one morning, after the scandal had exploded in the media. I could only imagine the rage in Harper's heart when she saw the news. But when Olivia didn't respond, Harper escalated. She called her, and when Olivia picked up, it wasn't the soothing, familiar voice that answered. It was a woman on the edge, defensive, filled with guilt but also trying to hide it. "Olivia, I can't believe you did this." Harper's voice crackled over the phone, sharp and filled with disbelief. "Do you have any idea what you've done? What we've lost because of you?" There was a long silence on Olivia's end. I was sitting in the living room when she took the call, trying to keep my distance from her. I had every reason to be angry, but hearing Harper's voice cut through the air, I felt a twinge of empathy. Maybe it wasn't the right time, but part of me knew that Harper was right to be furious. After all, Olivia's actions had torn apart not only my life but hers too. "I never meant for it to go this far," Olivia said softly, almost as though she was trying to convince herself more than Harper. "You have to understand, I never thought it would ruin everything." Harper didn't have time for Olivia's excuses. The edge in her tone cut through the weak defenses Olivia was trying to build. "Ruin everything? Are you serious? You've destroyed everything we've worked for. The business, your reputation, Ethan's career, and you think this is just some mistake? Olivia, you've lied to everyone. You've lied to me. I don't even know who you are anymore." There was a pause, and I could see Olivia's face, flushed with shame as she lowered her head. It wasn't just the affair that bothered Harper, it was everything that had come with it. Ethan's financial fraud, the lies that had accumulated over the months, the way Olivia had manipulated those closest to her. Harper had seen it all as a slow descent into something unrecognizable, and she wasn't willing to stand by and watch it unfold. "You think you're the victim here, but you're not," Harper continued, her voice growing colder. "You've burned every bridge you've built, Olivia. And the worst part? You dragged me down with you. Do you know how many people I've had to explain myself to? How many times I've had to apologize for being associated with you?" She let out a bitter laugh. "I'm done. You're on your own." Olivia's face twisted, her eyes welling up with tears. "Harper, please. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you, I swear." Harper's response was immediate, almost sharp. "You didn't just hurt me. You hurt everyone who ever trusted you. I trusted you. We built something together. I helped you with your career. We fought for the same things, Olivia, and now look at you. Look at what you've become." Her voice cracked, and I could hear the pain in her words. "You're not the woman I thought you were. I can't do this anymore." Olivia's shoulders sagged, and the phone slipped from her hand. She didn't cry, not in front of me at least, but I could see the weight of what was happening to her. It wasn't just the public fallout, the ruined career, or even the scandal. It was the realization that she had lost someone who truly cared for her. Someone who had been in her corner through everything. For the first time in weeks, I saw Olivia for what she was, not the woman I had married, not the confident lawyer who had always had everything under control, but someone stripped of the armor she had built around herself. I wasn't sure what hurt more, what she had done to me or what she had done to herself. As the days passed, the public fallout only deepened. But the personal consequences, the emotional destruction, were what tore Olivia apart the most. Harper's words had cut deep, and I could see her trying to pick up the pieces of her reputation, but it was impossible. People had already made up their minds. The affair, the financial misconduct. It all painted Olivia in a light she couldn't escape from. There were no more invitations to social events, no more lunches with clients, no more congratulatory emails or job offers. And without Harper's support, Olivia was left in the rubble of what she had once thought was a secure life. I could see how hard she tried to keep her composure, but the cracks were showing everywhere. She started isolating herself more and more, retreating into her thoughts like she was trying to hide from the truth. I wasn't going to pretend like I didn't feel betrayed. Like I wasn't disgusted by what she had done. But watching her, seeing how everything she had worked for, the things she had built with Harper, with me, was slipping away, it was hard not to feel a twinge of pity. Maybe that made me weak, but I couldn't help it. She was broken, and I wasn't sure if she would ever be able to put herself back together. Harper, though? Harper wasn't looking back. She was done with Olivia. And I couldn't blame her. After everything that had happened, Olivia had burned her bridges in ways I never imagined. She had betrayed not just me but someone who had stood by her through thick and thin. I could feel Harper's anger from miles away, and it was raw and justified. She wasn't going to let Olivia hide behind excuses anymore. I never saw Harper and Olivia together again after that phone call. They'd once been inseparable, two halves of a whole, but now it was like they were on opposite ends of a chasm, and nothing could bridge the gap. Olivia's reputation was in ruins, and so was Harper's trust in her. The foundation of everything they had worked so hard to build had crumbled, and I couldn't help but feel like it was the beginning of the end for everyone. Maybe this was the cost of betrayal. Maybe there was no way to escape it. The days that followed Harper's final words to Olivia were marked by an eerie silence. The kind of silence that settles over a person when they know they've lost everything. Olivia had always prided herself on being strong, on being in control, on never letting anything shake her. But now, every step she took seemed to echo with the weight of her failures. The career she had spent years building, the relationships she had fought to cultivate, they were slipping away from her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The first blow came when her firm, the place she had dedicated so much of her life to, distanced itself from her. Officially, they claimed it was due to the scandal, the financial misconduct that had made her name synonymous with dishonesty. Unofficially, the whispers were far worse. Olivia had always been known as a sharp lawyer, respected by her colleagues and clients. But now, that reputation had been shattered. When she walked into the office for the first time after the news broke, she could feel the coldness in the air. People who had once greeted her warmly barely looked at her. Colleagues who had shared lunches and coffee breaks with her now turned their backs when she passed by. The emails, the calls, all of it had stopped. Her clients, once loyal, began pulling their cases. They didn't want to be associated with a scandal like hers. Her once promising career had been erased in a matter of days, leaving behind nothing but a trail of destruction. She had lost everything, and now she had no choice but to watch it all fall apart. She tried to call her clients, to reassure them, to apologize, but no one was answering. The messages she sent were left unread, her name appearing in the news every day, the scandal growing worse by the minute. The firm made a statement distancing itself from her, and within hours, her name was removed from all the high-profile cases she had worked on. Her colleagues, once her friends, were now strangers. There were no words of comfort, no sympathetic glances. The judgment was clear in their eyes. Olivia was no longer the trusted, respected attorney they had once known. She had become an outcast. The fallout wasn't just professional, it was personal. Every relationship she had built, every connection she had made over the years, was now tainted by her actions. And it wasn't just the firm. Everywhere she went, she felt the weight of the public's judgment. Her name was on everyone's lips, not because of her accomplishments but because of her betrayal. The whispers, the sideways glances, the way people moved away from her when she entered a room, it all became too much. She stopped going out, stopped trying to salvage what was left. It didn't matter anymore. She had burned every bridge. But what hurt her more than anything was the silence from the people who had meant the most to her. I watched her in the days that followed, sitting on the couch for hours, staring at her phone, checking the same messages over and over, hoping that somehow, someone would reach out. But there was nothing. No texts from her colleagues, no apologies from those who had once called her a friend. There was only silence. Lydia was still reeling from everything. It wasn't just the affair that had caused the rift, it was everything that had followed. The lies, the deceit, the way Olivia had dragged her down with her. But even Lydia couldn't bring herself to comfort Olivia. She was too wrapped up in her own guilt, too overwhelmed by the chaos that had been unleashed. Olivia was alone in her crisis, left to face the consequences of her actions without anyone by her side. I could see the toll it was taking on her. The stress had aged her in ways I hadn't expected. Her once pristine appearance had begun to fade. Her eyes, which had always been sharp and determined, now seemed dull, hollow. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't eating. She had stopped caring about anything at all. Every day felt like a never-ending spiral into despair. I could see it in the way she carried herself, head down, shoulders slumped, as though the weight of her own failure was too much for her to bear. I tried talking to her, but the words didn't come easily. There was so much I wanted to say, so much anger and hurt that had built up in me, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. It felt pointless. She already knew how badly she had screwed up. She wasn't just losing her career. She was losing her sense of self. Olivia had always seen herself as the woman who could fix anything, who could handle anything that came her way. But now, faced with the total collapse of everything she had built, she didn't know who she was anymore. She was a shell of the woman I had once admired, and that truth cut deeper than anything she had done to me. The guilt gnawed at her every waking moment. She would apologize to me, again and again, her voice breaking, her eyes filled with regret. But I didn't know how to respond. What could I say? She had betrayed me. She had betrayed our entire family. But what hurt the most was seeing her like this, so utterly lost and broken. The woman who had always been so self-assured was now crumbling before me, and there was nothing I could do to fix it. One evening, as we sat in silence in the living room, Olivia finally spoke up. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know what to do anymore," she said, her eyes avoiding mine. "I've ruined everything. My career, my friendships. I don't even know if I can fix this. I don't know who I am anymore." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of everything she had lost. I didn't know what to say. There was a part of me that wanted to tell her she had done this to herself, that she had no one to blame but herself. But there was another part of me, the part that had once loved her, that couldn't bring myself to do it. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her things would get better, but I knew it was a lie. Things would never go back to the way they were. She had burned that bridge herself. Olivia's crisis was more than just the loss of a career, it was the unraveling of everything that had defined her. Her identity had been tied up in her success, in her ability to be the best, to be respected and admired. Now, she had nothing. Her friends were gone, her colleagues had turned their backs, and she had become a cautionary tale, a figure to be pitied or scorned, depending on who you asked. I could see it in her eyes. She was drowning in the consequences of her own choices. The weight of everything she had destroyed was too much for her to bear. And the worst part? There was no easy way out. No redemption, no second chance. She had lost everything. And no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape it. The Olivia I had once known was gone. And in her place was a woman who had to confront the reality of her mistakes, a woman who had no way of undoing the damage she had caused. It was too late for apologies now. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back. The professional world had turned its back on her, her friends had abandoned her, and all she could do was sit in the wreckage of her own life, wondering how she had allowed it all to slip away. I had never imagined it would come to this. The end of my marriage. The collapse of everything I had thought was stable, built on years of trust, love, and shared goals. But after everything that had happened, the affair with Ethan, the financial deceit, the public humiliation, there was no going back. Olivia had taken it all with her. Our life together, the reputation she had once so carefully crafted, the love we had built. And now, I was left holding the broken pieces of a life I no longer recognized. It happened quietly, in the most mundane way possible. We were sitting in the living room of the house that had once felt like a home, but now just seemed like a shell. Olivia had hardly spoken to me in weeks. The silence between us had grown so thick that even the smallest of exchanges felt heavy with regret. The divorce papers were on the coffee table between us, a stack of legal documents that would officially end everything. There was no ceremony, no drama. Just a quiet surrender to what had already been lost. Olivia sat across from me, her face pale, her eyes hollow. She had stopped fighting for anything. No attempts to repair the damage. No pleas to reconcile. She had already given up as much as I had. She signed the papers with a hand that trembled, and I followed suit, my signature scrawled on the page with a sense of finality I couldn't escape. There was no satisfaction in it. No feeling of triumph. Only the cold, sinking realization that this was the end. The life we had once shared was gone, buried under layers of lies, betrayal, and broken trust. As I handed the papers back to the lawyer, I felt a strange sense of freedom. It was as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but it wasn't the weight I had expected to feel. I thought I would be angry, relieved, or maybe even vindicated. Instead, there was just an overwhelming emptiness. A sense that nothing in my life would ever be the same again, but also a strange peace. The life I had once known was gone, and there was no point in holding on to it anymore. But freedom came at a price. As the divorce finalized, I knew I needed to change. My career, too, had been affected by the scandal. The trust one had once enjoyed with my colleagues had evaporated. People had been talking, speculating, judging. It wasn't just Olivia who had suffered. The ripple effects of her actions had touched everyone around her, especially me. I could feel the distance in my workplace, the quiet conversations when I walked into a room, the way clients hesitated before signing deals. It was as if I had become a part of the scandal, tainted by association. The choice was clear. I couldn't stay in the same field, not after everything that had happened. The betrayal I had endured, the way my name had been dragged through the mud, it was all too much. My career in finance, something I had worked so hard for, now felt suffocating, trapped under the weight of public perception. I knew it was time to make a change. I started looking at different opportunities, away from the high-pressure world I had been in for so long. The idea of going into something new, something completely different, became my way of reclaiming control. I didn't want to be defined by the scandal, by the years I had spent in a career that had now felt hollow. I wanted to build something new, something that was mine, something that had nothing to do with Olivia, with Ethan, with the wreckage of the past. I took a risk, diving into a career in consulting. It wasn't what I had trained for, but I had a vision. I began working with startups, advising them on growth strategies, handling their finances, but this time, on my terms. It was a shift that didn't just change my professional life, it changed me. I was no longer the man tied to a reputation that was falling apart. I was carving out my own path, creating a future that wasn't defined by the mistakes of the past. In the months that followed, I found a new sense of purpose. My work became more fulfilling. I met new people, built new relationships. I started to see that I could survive without the shadow of Olivia hanging over me. Slowly, I began to rebuild my confidence, piece by piece. It wasn't easy. The scars of the past still lingered, but I was no longer consumed by them. I had learned that the end of one chapter didn't mean the end of the book. Looking back, I knew that signing those divorce papers had been the right thing to do. I had to free myself from the toxic weight that Olivia had brought into my life. But in freeing myself, I had also found the space to rebuild. It wasn't just a new beginning, it was an evolution. And maybe, for the first time in years, I could finally see a future that was mine, a future that had nothing to do with betrayal and everything to do with moving forward.
Bye.